Studium to Studio with your local lay Dominicans, we'll be discussing some of the gems we discovered in our studium, where we share the fruits of our contemplation and the joy of the gospel message, representing our St. Albert the Great lay Dominican chapter, and co-host of today's show are myself, Cheryl Drozda,
Jeff Drozda,
Kevin Fontenot.
And today we're going to be talking about a particular apostolic exhortation of Pope Francis. Since I don't have to worry, as
I was worried.
Kevin was worried about losing his Cajun credentials, and I don't have to worry about that because I wasn't born here. So I'll go ahead and give it a try in its original language of French. It is called C'est La Confiance et rien que la confiance qui doit nous conduire à la mort.
Which means?
That's pretty good.
Thank you. Merci.
It is confidence and nothing but confidence that must lead us to love.
So the letter is called C'est La Confiance.
Yes.
So,
And this is from Pope Francis, and it's a reflection on Saint Therese, the little child, Jesus, and the Holy Face, in which he does a good job pulling out a lot of the principles of the little way and Saint Therese's spirituality and
because it was on her like a feast day or anniversary, wasn't it?
Yeah. So I forget which he actually says it in here somewhere. Why he wrote the exhortation. It was the 150th anniversary of her birth in Alençon.
Okay.
That he did that, and he had the pleasure of canonizing her parents.
Yes,
on the
that's
Feast
right.
of the Family, I believe he did that. But going back to the title of the exhortation, Pope Francis says these striking words of St. Therese get to the heart of basically the gospel message and why she became a doctor of the church, in that confidence and nothing but confidence is the sole path that leads us to the love that grants everything. With confidence, the wellspring of grace overflows into our lives. The gospel takes flesh within us and makes us channels of mercy for our brothers and sisters. It is confidence that sustains us daily and will enable us to stand before the Lord on the day when he calls us to himself. And he quotes St. Therese here, in which she says, quote, "In the evening of this life I shall appear before you with empty hands, for I do not ask you, Lord, to count my works. All our justice is stained in your eyes. I wish, then, to be clothed in your own justice and to receive from your love the eternal possession of yourself." And so what Pope Francis points out, and what St. Therese came to understand in her faith journey, is an unfailing trust in the Lord and a full abandonment of herself into the merciful love of Jesus Christ. And with that, being consumed by the merciful love of Jesus Christ made her, it drew people, as she puts it, drew people to herself. Like she attracts souls because she's such on fire with the merciful love of Jesus Christ. And that is because, number one, she found her vocation. She was centered on what's primary in the Christian faith, and is that Jesus is my one love, that Jesus is the center. And we're seeing that with Pope Leo the 14th.
Right.
He's really trying to center the church back on that one principle. And the doctrines and rules and dogmas of the church are all beautiful and expand on that one center, in that all our trust and all our faith belong to God. That is where we find our fulfillment, is in the love of Jesus and our faith that there's a loving God who's going to work everything to our good. As St. Paul says, that everything in life works to our good.
And in the Gospel of St. John, God is love, right?
Yes, exactly. She is the patroness of missions, because she understood how Jesus attracts people. That her appreciation of the fact that evangelization takes place by attraction, not by pressure or proselytization. So we can start off is that God is love. She's immersed in the merciful love of Jesus Christ, and it's an attraction to the souls around her. That's how we become Jesus to others. And so that's how we get that missionary soul free from self-absorption. Jesus is my one love. It was her interpretation of the supreme statement of the New Testament that God is love.
Right.
Therese's mission was that she desired in heaven to do same thing that she would do now on earth, and that's to love Jesus and to make him loved for the sake of souls. And she's pointing out the roots of evangelization. It's evangelization by attraction. It's complete love of Jesus that draws souls around you into the same love. So it is the beauty that comes from you as Christ changes you internally. Like, you become more patient, you become kinder. There's always this unique characteristic of saints that I've heard, is that when they speak to someone, that person always feels like they're the only person in the room, like their full attention is on that person. Mm-hmm. And that is Jesus Christ in them. That's that attraction that Jesus Christ gives. In Therese's heart, the grace of baptism became the impetuous torrent flowing into the ocean of Christ's love and dragging in its wake a multitude of brothers and sisters. It was her promised shower of roses. So meaning, like, the torrent, it's thrown into this deep ocean of water, and it makes these ripples and these currents, and everything in that wake is pulled into that ripple current. And so that love of Jesus is what pulls souls to her, and that's what she described as her shower of roses.
So, and I think that it's an interesting point to mention. Tell us a story about this Italian murderer, maybe. I mean, convicted, but tell us a story about his story, and even more importantly, how Therese was really affected by not only the crime, but also how her prayer was answered.
Okay, yes. This was before she entered Carmel, and again, after her baptism and her growing up in such a loving Catholic family, she had this overflowing need for souls. It was the burning love, the merciful love of Jesus. And so she heard about this gentleman named Henry Pranzini, and she felt a remarkable spiritual closeness to this particular person. He was sentenced to death for a triple murder in which he was unrepentant. So by going to masses, having masses offered to him for him, and praying with complete confidence for his salvation, she was convinced that she was drawing him closer to the blood of Christ. And she told God that she was sure that at the last moment he would pardon him, even if when he went to his death without any signs of repentance. Mm-hmm. Like, she was so confident in the merciful love of God that even though this particular man, Henry Pranzini, went to his death unrepentant, that God would pardon him. And as a reason for her certainty, she stated, "I was absolutely confident in the mercy of Jesus." She was totally confident in God. Everything was outside of her merit. And that's how she thought of herself. That's why she was so confident that she was going to be a great saint, is because he can do it. And I am little, and I need to find a little way. We'll get to that, a way to get there. But it's all Jesus Christ. And so she was thrilled that she had learned that Pranzini, of course, after he had mounted the scaffolding, I guess he was getting ready to be executed, suddenly seized by inspiration, took hold of the crucifix that the priest was holding out to him, and kissed the sacred wounds three times.
Wow.
This intense experience of hoping against all hope proved fundamental to her. She said that after this unique grace, my desire to save souls grows each day. So it was her first plea to the Father for a particular soul, and it was because of her faith and confidence in his merciful love that he was going to pardon this murderer.
And that gave her, that was like a confirmation, which is really a grace from God. But we need to have that confidence, even if we don't see sometimes the immediate results. That was a gift. And obviously she goes on to spend her whole life, basically trying to pray and, what would you say, allow for God to use her to sacrifice and pray for the conversion of sinners. So for someone who like that is giving their whole life to that, this was just, I think, a really beautiful way for God to show her, no matter what, my mercy will show forth. And I think that's what we all have to remember in our prayer life, is that God, we can have confidence in God. And it reminds me of Saint Faustina, who said that she wants to be so confident in God's love. We got Jesus, I trust in you from that Divine Mercy devotion. I want to be so confident in God that if I take a step and the very ground beneath my foot crumbles, I'll know that he has me still. And so that's a type of confidence we all want to have and embody. Also, the care for others. That really stood out. Just the care for other people's souls at all times would be such a good thing to ask for. I know I'm going to try to ask for that more often. I just think is a beautiful witness and a great, I'm glad that Pope Francis kind of spotlighted this.
Well, it began her search for her little way. So she understood that, she grew up in an affluent family. A lot of her sisters, majority of her sisters went to the convent.
Right.
And there wasn't, kind of like a lot of us, we look at our normal lives and we can't, at least in our minds, become great saints. Not in the sense of, say, like St. Thomas Aquinas, like St. Dominic, like Ignatius of Loyola, St. Francis de Sales, all these people who were scholars. And so how do we do that? And so she discovered her little way, the path of trust and love, also known as the way of spiritual childhood, in which she tells how she discovered this little way. I can, then, in spite of my littleness, aspire to holiness. It is impossible for me to grow up, and so I must bear with myself, such as I am, with all my imperfections. But I want to seek out a means of going to heaven by a little way, a way that is very straight, very short, and totally new. So to describe this way, she uses the image of an elevator. She says that the elevator which must raise me to heaven is your arms, O Jesus. And for this, I had no need to grow up, but rather I had to remain little and become this more and more. Little, incapable of being confident in myself, and yet firmly secure in the loving power of the Lord's arms. So it was this confidence not in herself, but in God, that Jesus sets before the little and the poor, before everyone. This is actually the true way to true happiness. So it instead of a more Pelagian primary notion of holiness, very individualistic and elitist, that primarily emphasizes human effort, Therese always stresses the primacy of God's work, his gift of grace. As a result, she could say, I always feel, however, the same bold confidence of becoming a great saint, because I don't count on my merits, since I have none, but I trust in him who is virtue and holiness. God alone, content with my weak efforts, will raise me to himself and make me a saint, clothing me in his infinite merits. So it is by his merits. And this is something that it's not opposed to traditional Catholic teaching, for in the increase of grace, namely the ones gratuitously justified by sanctified grace, we are changed and enabled to cooperate by our good works in the process of growth in holiness. This is from Pope Francis. This is the elevation we can possess real merit by virtue of the development of the grace received. Okay, so her notion of basically putting the ball in God's court is not against Catholic teaching. So we understand that through our baptism and reception of the sacraments, the sanctifying grace. We can have full confidence that in our actions, they will become holy if we work through the merits of Jesus Christ, who won those merits for us on the cross. And so it's the dying of self, which is the key to happiness, because like all the saints have always lived and were aware that their merits themselves. So what they did was pure grace. So this conviction, it gives rise to a joyful and tender gratitude, because all is a gift. Even your good works are a gift. Like, you don't worry about the outcomes of your good works. You allow the Holy Spirit to work through you, and the outcome is going to be the outcome. It's not up to you. You are there just to do the will of God. And there's a lot of freedom there, because you understand it's not on you. It's the Spirit working through me.
It's on God. That's what it boils down to. You're listening to Studium to Studio. We are your Third Order Dominicans, your lay Dominicans here based out of Lafayette, Louisiana. And you can listen to us every Thursday, 4 p.m. on 90.5 FM, 99.5 FM, and 12:30 a.m. And we are here and greatly appreciate, talking about gratitude, greatly appreciate Stein Lumber with locations throughout all of Acadiana. And so today we are talking about an exhortation, and we're going to talk about what's the difference between exhortation and encyclical. But we're talking about the exhortation that Pope Francis promulgated, and Cheryl's going to once again tell us the correct French pronunciation
Put her on the spot.
of this encyclical and the first line. So because her French is so wonderful. So so go for it again.
After that, I'm a little scared, but C'est la confiance et rien que la confiance qui doit nous conduire à la mort. So that is the sort of the summary of what we're trying to get at, is the confidence and nothing but confidence that must lead us to love, which is God, of course. Not like, what's the song from The Sound of Music where she says, confidence in me? That's what,
Yeah.
Not like that type of
Not
confidence.
my confidence.
No, it's a, let's go back. It's a daily abandonment to the
right.
merciful love of God. And so what Therese, let's pick up where Pope Francis takes off with this total abandonment and this confidence. He says it's an integral, that it has an integral meaning that embraces the totality of concrete existence and finds application in our daily lives, where we are often assailed by fear, the desire for human security, the need to have everything under control. Here we see the importance of her invitation, talking about St. Therese, to a holy abandonment. The beautiful thing about this holy abandonment is that the complete confidence that becomes, I'm quoting Pope Francis here, the complete confidence that becomes an abandonment in love sets us free from obsessive calculations, constant worry about the future, and fears that take away our peace. So in St. Therese's final days, she insisted on this, that in her words, we who run in the way of love shouldn't be thinking of suffering that can take place in the future. It is a lack of confidence. If we are in the hands of a Father who loves us without limits, this will be the case, come what may. We will be able to move beyond whatever may happen to us, and in one way or another, His plan of love and fullness will come to fulfillment in our lives. Now, this is like, that's powerful. She's basically saying what the gospel says and what Pope St. John Paul II said is, do not fear.
Right.
Abandon your life to God, and He'll work everything out for you. And it's this idea that everything is a gift, that every act, and I struggle with this notion because it's kind of wild, but you think about some of the horrible things that could happen to people, and in those particular moments, a lot of people think they're abandoned by God, but it's in those particular moments that the Lord is closest to them, and just the very fact that, and this is going to sound crazy, but just the very fact that you're alive to be able to experience that particular moment is an indication that there's a God that loves you and he's there with you. I do believe that in every situation, God gives you different ways to love him because he loves you infinitely and he wants you to, obviously, the love wants to be loved to reciprocate. And so in those times that hard situations, he's trying to allow you to love him in a different way. And with this complete confidence, even as bad as it gets, and there's some horrible situations out there, you can have confidence that the Lord is with you and something good is going to come out of it. And the reason we know this, and the reason St. Therese knew this, is because the greatest thing that ever happened to us came through the worst thing that ever happened to any man on humankind. And that was the incarnate God made flesh in Jesus Christ, who was falsely accused, abandoned by his friends, viciously, brutally put on, hung on a tree, yes, and died.
Right.
And it's because of that and his resurrection that we have salvation. So the worst thing that could ever happen to anybody in this particular world happened, and the greatest thing came out of it. So there's where your confidence comes that God loves you so much that even in the worst moments that you're facing, you're not alone. He's going to make something good out of it. It may not happen in this life, but you will experience his mercy and love in some particular way through that.
And I see a quote by, I believe it's by St. Therese, that says, Jesus does not demand great actions from us, but simply surrender and gratitude. And for me, that's very comforting because you were talking about more of a passive way of, hoping for God's mercy. And this is a more active way. Like sometimes we feel like we have to do things the right way or do particular things. And this is something where I just really find that it's simply stated that what I have to do today, surrender to God's will and be grateful for his mercy. And and then, even though we're Dominican, I love the Carmelite saying, do what you can with the time you have for the love of God. That's all we can do today, right?
Exactly. Well, it's going back to that spiritual childhood. So it's the notion that you have a loving father, and that's where the trust comes in, that I have a loving parent that's going to let me go. So you're like that child who's in the kitchen with their mother, right? And she lets you stir the pot a little bit, but you actually don't make the dish. It is the loving, in this case would be the loving father. But your effort is so appreciated by the loving father, just like if you're children, like you're trying to teach them certain things, and their small efforts, you have a lot of pride in that. And that's what our Heavenly Father sees in us when we're giving forth that effort, and he will bless that effort. And so that's it right there. And so it's going to lead into her further maturation, because she was trying to find her place in the church. Obviously, being a disciple of St. Teresa of Avila and St. John of the Cross, she was trying to find her particular way in the church, and she really couldn't find her place, because she not only couldn't find it in like particular intellectually, she wanted all of it. Mm-hmm. Like she really thought big. With her passion for the gospel, she couldn't find a vocation that could satisfy her, and so in seeking her place in the church, she turned to chapter 12 of the first letter of Corinthians and chapter 13. And what she found is, obviously, at chapter 12, St. Paul talks about the church being a body, and she was trying to figure out where she fits in that. And it wasn't until chapter 13 when she read the hymn to charity, which everybody knows. A lot of couples use that as one of their readings in their weddings and ceremonies. And so it struck her, and of course, I'm going to quote from her here. She said, "Considering the mystical body of the church, I had not recognized myself in any of the members described by St. Paul, or rather, I desire to see myself in them all. Charity gave me the key to my vocation. I understood that if the church had a body composed of different members, the most necessary and most noble of all could not be lacking to it. And so I understood that the church had a heart, and that this heart was burning with love. I understood it was love alone that made the church's members act, that if love ever became extinct, apostles would not preach the gospel, and martyrs would not shed their blood. I understood that love comprised all vocations, that love was everything, that it embraced all times and places. In a word, that it was eternal. Then, in the excess of my delirious joy, I cried out, "Oh, my Jesus, my love, my vocation. At last, I found it. My vocation is love." So that's what she figured out. Said, I will be love. My vocation is love. And it is the central theme to all vocations. It is everything we're supposed to do as Christians, as St. Paul said in chapter 13.
So what role do you think the veneration of the Holy Face played in her vocation? Obviously, it was a very strong devotion in France during this time, and I believe that the family, they were enrolled in the our confraternity of the Holy Face. And what role do you think that played, and what role can that play for us today?
Well, it is obviously one of surrendering himself completely to the cross as far as Jesus Christ, because it's the face of Jesus as he suffered. So it is a good example of that abandonment to the will of the Father. I'm sure that had some influence on her.
I mean, because she took the name Saint
the
Therese
Therese
of the Child Jesus and the Holy
Face.
Face, right? So that was something that was brought up in the document, and I found one thing where it was stated. You mentioned the mystical body of Christ, Kevin, and also that it's reflected in the face of Christ that what he's suffering in his mystical body, right?
Right.
So that reflection also is, I guess, an analogy for the church as well.
And the veneration and prayers to the Holy Face is really act of reparation. And the prayer that was dictated by Sister Mary of St. Peter, called the Golden Arrow Prayer. So I mentioned earlier that this is an exhortation. So what is the difference between an apostolic exhortation and an encyclical?
Papal encyclical. The only thing I could simply say is that the apostolic exhortation would have more to do with like pastoral emphasis, not it's just exhorting the faithful and encouraging them in their faith, whereas the papal encyclical would have a little more weight and be more geared toward doctrinal issues.
So one of the main points Pope Francis wanted to make in this exhortation is how it applies to today with a lot of things we're facing. And so he does break down Therese's spirituality in this particular way, quoting Pope Francis here. In an age that urges us to focus on ourselves and our own interests, St. Therese shows us the beauty of making our lives a gift. At a time when the most superficial needs and desires are glorified, she testifies to the radicalism of the gospel. In an age of individualism, she makes us discover the value of a love that becomes intercession for others. At a time when human beings are obsessed with grandeur and new forms of power, she points out to us the little way. In an age that casts aside so many of our brothers and sisters, she teaches us the beauty of concern and responsibility for one another. At a time of great complexity, she can help us rediscover the importance of simplicity, the absolute primacy of love, trust and abandonment, and thus moving beyond a legalistic or moralistic mindset that would fill the Christian life with rules and regulations and cause the joy of the gospel to grow cold. In an age of indifference and self-absorption, Therese inspires us to be missionary disciples, captivated by the attractiveness of Jesus and the gospel.
Well, that's beautiful, true, and good. So remember to stand firm in the absolute truth, Jesus Christ, because only the truth bears grace.
Lived through time, passed through fire, broke my heart, wounded desire, changed my life, fixed the past, stared at death.